thing that I want to say about Buddhism is that Buddhism began with the Buddha. In other words, Buddhism began with an actual person. So the Buddha, before he was the Buddha, was an ordinary person, basically, an ordinary person born, as far as we know, 2,500 years ago in India, but born an ordinary human being. And that's very important. That's got very important implications for the whole of Buddhism. So Buddhism began with the Buddha. The Buddha was a human being, not a god or anything like that, an ordinary human being. And he was an ordinary human being who paid attention to his experience. So this is how Buddhism began, with someone paying attention to their experience. And particularly paying attention to the difficult facts of life. So paying attention to the fact that in life, however your life is, we all face three existential facts, which is everyone grows old, everyone gets sick, and everyone dies. And we don't know when those things will happen. So obviously we all know those things in theory, but the Buddha was someone who made it his business to make that more than a theory, who really took in those facts very, very deeply. We all know it, but it often doesn't hit us. Even when somebody close to us dies, or when we get suddenly sick, it might hit us a bit more deeply for a while, but we spend quite a lot of our lives trying to escape those facts of life, or either we get overwhelmed by them or we push them away. Often we don't realise we've done that till it kind of comes to the crunch. Just remember reading War and Peace, and it was on the TV recently as well, wasn't it? But I don't know if they had this bit on the TV. I forget what was the character's name? Anyway, he's in the war, and he's just about to be killed, and he thinks, but I'm my mother's favourite. I'm my mother. It can't be me. I'm my mother's favourite. So I think even though we know these facts, a bit of us thinks, but it can't be me that this is going to happen to. So the Buddha, for a start, was a young man who actually took in, this isn't just a theory, this means me, and this means everybody I love and everyone I care about is going to grow old, is going to get sick, and is going to die. So he started paying attention to those first three existential facts. Now, luckily for him and us, he didn't just notice these three things about life. The legend is that he went out one day from where he lived and he saw a wandering holy person, just someone, we don't really know who he was, he doesn't enter into the story again, but who was living what was termed in those days the holy life, wandering, probably begging his food. But what the Buddha noticed about him was he looked mindful, he looked calm, he looked serene. And the Buddha the young man who was to become the Buddha, thought, this could be the way, in the face of this kind of crisis of facing these existential facts, this could be the way to find something that goes beyond. So that was what he did. He left home, went into the homeless life, and practiced meditation and other practices, and eventually became what we now call the Buddha, eventually became enlightened and became the Buddha. So I wanted to start with that Buddhism began with an actual real person having a real experience. In other words, what we now call Buddhism isn't something added on to life. It isn't something sort of from outside, as it were, that we're sort of asked to believe in or trying to believe in. It's something that arose out of an individual person's inner experience and subsequent search. So This is, as I say, really important and has important implications for us. So after the Buddha realised enlightenment, what that is going to be gone into in more detail in the next talk. So do stay around for the next talk at 3 o'clock if you can, what enlightenment is. It's almost like then, it's like if you take a retrospective look at that, the Buddha laid out a path for other human beings. When I say that the implications of the Buddha being a human being is important, that's one of the things I mean. That if the Buddha could realise enlightenment, could realise freedom from the suffering that's inherent in human existence, then that is possible for every single other human being as well. That's a potential for every single other human being. Whether they realise that or not, whether we realise that potential or not, and make it real is up to us, but it's a potential for all human beings, and that's been laid down as a set of teachings. That's been the Buddha. Then he wouldn't have been, in a way, he wouldn't have been thinking of it as a systematic path when he was, as a young man, conducting this search. But now it's been laid down as a path. Hi there. I'm sure there's a cushion. Maybe put your hand up if there's a cushion. So what I'm going to say is now the path that's been laid out. It's been sort of systematised since then. So the path that we can follow, and it's been systematised into, well, many different teachings, but one simple way is thinking of it in 3 ways. Three successive ways of practicing, and they are ethics, meditation, and wisdom. The thing is that, especially the word ethics, it's a bit of an unfortunate word, perhaps. So I'm going to give you the Sanskrit words, which are Sila, Samadi, and Prajna, because ethics in Buddhism means far more and possibly something different than our Western idea, especially our Western post-Christian idea of ethics. So say Sila, Samadi and Prajna, that's the systemization of what we call Buddhism, the Buddhism as a path. So Sila is examining the effect our actions have on ourselves and on other people. And interesting enough, by actions, Buddhism also includes what we do in our own mind, that also affects us. And that's why meditation is so important, which I'll come back to. So we can start by just looking at our actions, and that itself is in 3 levels. So we can start by seeing and asking ourselves whether this is true or not as well, but by seeing that if we act in ways that are kind and generous and truthful, that has a direct positive effect on ourselves. If we act kindly, we'll tend to feel more connected, and we actually will be more connected because that'll be reflected back to us from the rest of the world. On the whole, I'll put that out there, and then we can examine that in our own experience. So that's the first level, but it's deeper than just a sort of it's deeper than a sort of self-interested thing when we talk about Sila. It's actually, on a deeper level, it's starting to get a bit more sensitive to the fact that at base, other people aren't really so different than ourselves. So it's realising that just like us, other people have hopes and fears, they want to be fulfilled in life, they've got people they love and so on. It's connecting with that more deeply and letting that affect our relationships with people. So it's becoming more sensitive to this, to our connection with other human beings. we're often aware of our differences, but it's becoming more and more sensitive to the fact that we are connected. So that you could say that's the second level of Sila. So the first is seeing that acting in a way that's kind and generous actually makes us happier than if we act in ways that are selfish and cruel. The second level is becoming more and more sensitive to our connection. And then thirdly, what Buddhism teaches is that if we keep practicing in this way, a sort of turning point is reached where this is harder to talk about, but where actually to act selfishly would become impossible. That to be unselfish would become second nature. And this only happens when you've realised really, really deeply this thing I was saying about that other beings are at root no different than ourselves. We probably all have little tastes of that in our life. You know that feeling that if you really love someone and they ask you to do something or they need your help, it just feels like second nature to help them. It doesn't feel like it's really a difficult choice. In some ways, it doesn't feel like it's any choice. You just want to help them. You're glad to help them. Sometimes, if you really love someone, you're looking for ways that you can help them. So it's like you can't separate out whose will it is anymore. So you can't say that it's exclusively the other person who's asked you to do the thing. It's not completely their will because you just want to do it. But you can't completely say it's your will because they've stimulated that wish in you. Do you see what I mean? There's a sort of blending of, you can't tell anymore, is it your will, is it their will? So we've all probably, imagine, felt that, even maybe felt it quite regularly, experienced it regularly, or maybe just occasionally. But what Buddhism says is it's possible to feel that for all beings all of the time. Now that, probably for most of us, is, well certainly for me, is unthinkably far away. But although for me it's unthinkably far away, I can see that it's on that same trajectory as what I've just described, is that I do feel it sometimes with some people. So I can see that it could be possible. It could be possible. For the Buddha, when he became the Buddha, that was what he would experience all the time. That it would be second nature to be kind. It wouldn't even be being kind for a Buddha. It would just be, just be what a Buddha did, just be what an enlightened person did. So that's what, when we talk about ethics or Sila in Buddhism, that's what we're talking about. When we talk about meditation or Samadi, which is the next stage, if you like, of the path, we're talking about, we've just had a talk on this, but so I'll just be brief, but we're talking about the practice of meditation. And what we're trying to do when we practice meditation in Buddhism is we're trying to realize a state of being that's both energetic and calm. So it's energized, calm. It's depicted very well in the figure of the Buddha that we have sitting. So you're practicing meditation practices in order to have a mind that's both calm and energized at the same time. Often we can be one or the other. We can be energetic, but in a sort of caffeinated, speedy sort of way, or we can be calm in a soporific sort of way. But what we're trying to do with meditation Samadhi is have a state of mind that is both energetic and calm. And again, if you practice meditation, you might have touched on this. Even if you haven't practiced meditation, it's not outside human experience. Like experiences like looking up at the stars, looking at a beautiful piece of art, being with somebody you feel really connected with, and just having a engaged, heartfelt conversation. And we've all probably experienced times when we felt both completely alive and calm at the same time. And it's often characterised by sort of timelessness. We're not there's no sense of, oh, this is nice, but when's the next thing? There's no sense of, you're just kind of happily there, just happily, as I say, looking at the stars, looking at a sunset, some beauty of nature, engaged with a person, or, engrossed in a novel, or just reading a poem. That's the state. That's samadhi, or that's a touch of samadhi. What Buddhism says is you can deepen and deepen that samadhi. And then prajna, or wisdom, in a sense, this is what makes Buddhism in a sense. Prajna, or wisdom, this is the third of these three. So now we could talk for a long time about this, so I'll just try and give a very quick outline. So I'll give you an image. So what Buddhism says is that our vision, not our literal vision, but our vision of reality, our way of seeing the universe is obscured, and it talks about it being obscured by two veils, yeah? So it's saying that our states of mind, the first veil is saying that our states of mind stop us from seeing things clearly. And we can probably all relate to this, like if we're in a state of anxiety, a state of ill will, a state of kind of wanting something that we've not got, or not wanting something that we have got. The world looks different depending on those states. I was aware of this myself acutely the other day. I was on a retreat. That's probably why I was a little bit more aware of it. I was on a retreat, and we're very often, if you come to this centre, if you take up come to this centre, we'll be continually encouraging you to go on retreat. But I hope this doesn't put you off, because even on retreat, I'm afraid to say it is possible to get in a bad mood. So I was on a retreat and I was in a bad mood because I'd had a conversation with someone that I hadn't been happy with, and so I was in this bad, like, why did they have to talk to me just then about just that? I was feeling so great beforehand, now I'm in a bad mood. And so I was in a bad mood, and we were at the end of the retreat. And at the end of retreats, we often have a little session where people just say how the retreat went, how it had been for them. And what people were saying, I could see with my sort of brain, I could see with my intelligence that what they were saying was perfectly acceptable, even quite moving. But my twisted state of heart, it was like that story, do you know that fairy story of the Snow Queen? And in the Snow Queen, there's this wizard, and the wizard's got this magic mirror, and the mirror, he flies up with it into the sky. Everybody that is reflected in that mirror looks ugly. And the wizard thinks this is a great joke. And then he flies up into the sky with it, and he drops it, and it shatters. And everybody that gets a bit of the splinter of the glass in their eye, everything looks ugly. And everybody that gets a splinter in their heart, everything seems really hateful. Well, I felt, listening to these people saying these perfectly lovely things, I felt like I had a splinter of that glass in my eye and my heart, because everything just seemed not right. But I sort of knew it was me, I knew it was me, because what they were saying was like, as I say, about how much they'd enjoyed the retreat, thank you to the leaders of which I was one, and so on. But everything in me was like, it wasn't the Christmas retreat, by the way, if any of you were on it. It was another, it was another different retreat elsewhere. So do you know that feeling of having that bit of splinter of glass in your heart and in your eye? So that's the first sort of, I'm mixing my metaphors wildly here now. Now back to the veil. That's like the veil, yeah? That our vision's obscured by greed and hatred, by wanting and by not wanting. Yeah, that will colour the way we see the world. But Buddhism takes it even deeper. It says that even apart from the moods we're in, our very perception itself is affected by our below conscious level views, by our very deep views. So by views, I don't mean like political views or anything like that. It's something much deeper than that, on an existential level. And that we'll have a view that's either eternalistic, which is probably less common these days, or materialistic, which is probably more common these days in the 21st century in the West. That we'll have a subtly, or perhaps less subtly, materialistic view that basically says that matter is all there is. That all that's really true is the world of appearances. It's what we see in front of us. That's the beginning and end of life, of the universe, and Buddhism says there is more than that. But if we want to see that there is more than that, we'll have to sort of systematically unpick that view, because it's below consciousness. It's below common sense, if you like. Our common sense view says, well, this is the real world, this waking world, where things happen, and I feel like I'm me and you all are you, and from your point of view it's the other way around. Our common sense view says, well, that's it, that's the world. Buddhism says there is something more. There is something more. It's not eternalistic either. That more isn't that there's some heavenly realm or something. There is something more, but to even get to that more, you'll have to unpick that view. You'll have to unstitch that second veil, that which obscures what wisdom is. So we have to work on that through practices. One way of doing that is just to start to sort of just loosen that and start to unravel that veil that says this world is all there is. Just by examining what we think of as real and what we think of as unreal. So we tend to think, for example, the waking world is more real than the dreaming world. But you can start to think, is that so? Is that true? Why do I think one is more or less real than the other? So I'm not saying that the dreaming world is... what I'm not saying is the dreaming world is more real than the waking world. What I'm saying, trying to say, is something a bit more subtle than that neither are more or less as real or as unreal as the other. The world of meditation, if we do meditate, is that more real or less real? Those times when we do feel that time has stopped a little bit, is that more real or less real than the world of watches and clocks and time and so on? So we can start to unpick that. Now, Buddhism gives us practices in order to do that, and says to us, actually, if we want to realise what the mind really is is capable of, the full potential of the mind, then we have to examine these notions more closely. So that's the level of wisdom. Now, I'm aware, actually, I haven't done it justice at all in these few minutes, but you can ask me about it in a moment. But I just wanted to hopefully at least give you, what I wanted to do was give you a taste of, what Buddhism is saying is there's a lot that's possible. We've got these three aspects, Sila or ethics, Samadi or meditation and prana. And I want to point out that meditation falls in the middle. I'm saying that because many people, including myself, come to centres like this in order to learn to meditate, which is great. And there's far more to meditation than just meditation. On one hand, if we start to meditate, we start to realise we have to examine our lives. So we'll have to examine the fact that the way we act in the world has an effect on both ourselves and others, and will affect our how deeply we can go in meditation. Also, if we meditate with any degree of seriousness, we'll start to bump up against these more existential questions. We'll start to question the world of appearances and start to question, is that really all there is? Is this material world really all there is? Because if we go on retreat especially or meditate, we'll start to have experiences that are beyond that world, for want of a better way of putting it. So these three, Sila, Samadi and Prajna, they're three levels, but they aren't stacked up like building blocks. They're actually, they're interrelating with each other all the time. Our meditation will interact with our ethics, also with our delving into this more wisdom aspect, becoming less selfish and realising that there is no hard and fast boundary between myself in here and you all out there, is a wisdom practice as well. So an ethical practice can become a wisdom practice. So they'll all interrelate with each other. So that's Sila, Samadi and Prajna. That's the path of Buddhism. But I want to say just two more things before I stop for questions. Because it kind of makes, talking like this, it makes it sound like it's all one way, that it's all up to us. And in a sense it is. Buddhism puts great store by taking responsibility for oneself, which is both challenging and exciting. We're not, it's not a sort of a blind belief system. It's a system of practicing and testing practices in our own experience. At the same time, there's something else that I hope I can do justice to, that is as if when we practice these practices to encounter reality more clearly and really, is as if, now how can I want to say this without sounding all mystical, but it's as if we're trying to know reality, but it's as if reality itself wants to be known. Now I'm speaking poetically here rather than literally. So it's like we're practicing from our end, but it's as if we're trying to grow, but it's as if life itself wants us to grow. And as I say, I'm saying that I'm speaking poetically, and I'm trying to make it not sound too sort of weird and mystical. And I think we possibly all have had experience of this as well. We might have had experience just again in acting ethically and acting kindly. When we act kindly, when we act generously, well, this is my experience, and I'm sure it's yours. It's not just that it feels more pleasant to act like that. It makes oneself feel better and other people feel better. It feels more true. It feels kind of both more simple and more true in my experience. It feels like, oh yeah, this is what the world's meant to be like. Often when I'm on retreat, I feel like that as well. When everybody's just being a bit kinder, a bit more open in communication, there's a feeling of, oh yeah, this is what life's for. You know, this is what the world's meant to be like. Now again, I've got to speak poetically, because even saying this is what life's for makes it sound like there's something outside of all of us that's created us for something. And Buddhism says no, there's no sort of creator in Buddhism that's put us here for a reason. At the same time, there can be this feeling of, oh yeah, this is what my life is for. People know that feeling. People had that from time to time when they've acted, maybe done something particularly creative or particularly things are kind of going well, not in a worldly way of going well, but things are harmonious in one's relationships. You think, yes, this is what life's for. So that's what I mean when I say it can feel like life itself wants us to grow. And I think I have come to believe it's more important to notice those moments and let oneself be moved by them and not be too sceptical about them. We don't want to be gullible in Buddhism, but we're so clever these days, and so sort of sceptical as a kind of culture that I want to encourage myself to be open to those moments when I think, oh, this is what life's for, to let myself be moved by that. So I started off by saying that Buddhism starts with the Buddha. I want to finish by saying that Buddhism, in a sense, ends with the Buddha. So an enlightened being. So that what or who is an enlightened being? Well, you hear about enlightenment in the next talk, but it's as if there's this potential in reality itself, has this potential in it, but potential is only sort of worth something if somebody actually realizes it. Otherwise, what does it mean to say potential? And the Buddha was the first person, for Buddhists, the Buddha was the first person who realized the potential that's inherent in reality. It's like you could say, when the Buddha became enlightened, reality knew itself fully for the first time. I'm saying that, and I can hardly grasp what I mean myself, but reality can only know itself through the human, through a person. It's all very well to talk about potential, well, in anything, but it can only be realised through an actual person realising it. Through an actual person who is wise, who is compassionate, who is creative. Other words, these things just stay as abstract qualities unless a person realises them. And for Buddhists, the Buddha is the person who's realised these to the highest degree possible. The qualities of wisdom, compassion, energy in pursuit of the good, fearlessness, freedom. They've been realised in the person of the Buddha the most fully. Because the Buddha was the first to realise them, but then other people can realise them as well. So enlightenment, as I said, is a possibility for all human beings. And then finally, just to say, when I said Buddhism ends with the Buddha, I also want to say I only mean that in a certain sense. I mean it ends with the Buddha, and the Buddha has realised the highest human potential. But it doesn't end in the sense of a full stop, because even for a Buddha, even for an enlightened being, there is further expression of that enlightenment continually. It never comes to an end. So creativity never comes to an end. How could it? Compassion never comes to an end, because there's always more and new and more responsive ways to be compassionate. Wisdom never comes to an end. Energy never comes to an end. So an enlightened being is a being of constant creativity, which is never ending. The only thing that's really ended is greed and hatred and delusion. They've ended. The Buddha has started as a human being, but transcended what we usually think of as human, has gone beyond, has gone beyond what we usually think of as human and become a Buddha, and in the Enlightenment has sort of looked back, as it were, and given us a path to follow to realise that potential ourselves. And that path starts with ethics, Sila, includes meditation, Samadi, and particularly includes wisdom, Prajna. That's what makes Buddhism, this aspect. So, I've talked for a little bit longer than I meant to, but we've still got 10 or 15 minutes, which would be great to have any questions on anything I've said, particularly, but anything else about Buddhism that you would like to ask. We won't have time to hear from everyone, but I'd be very glad to have questions. Anything you don't agree with? Yes, two simultaneously. Yes, yeah.
So if like me, you come here today knowing very little,
Yeah.
and you want to learn more,
Yeah.
and take it further,
Mm-hmm.
what is the next step? What would you recommend?
What I would recommend, that's a great question, is take our programme, learn to meditate. So we've got drop-in meditation classes every Tuesday evening and Wednesday evening and Thursday evening. So come and learn to meditate. But also we've got drop-in Buddhism classes and courses on a Monday evening. So if you're particularly interested in Buddhism and meditation, come on a Monday evening, come to a course where we teach. We've got a 6-week course teaching meditation and Buddhism, starting, I think probably either tomorrow or the week after next. It'll be on the programme. So I would say that. And there's loads more than that, like retreats. And as a complete, even as somebody who's come here for the very first time, all our introductory retreats they're open to people coming for the first time. So retreats, classes and courses, Yeah. And if you want to, I haven't got the programme here in front of me, but if you want to chat to me afterwards or one of the team, we can look more specifically. Yeah. Great. Yeah?
I'd be interested in hearing about the ritualistic aspects
Oh.
of Buddhism.
Yeah.
What are they these days? Is it important?
Okay, so that's a good question. So we do practice a devotional ritual here at this Buddhist centre, and even actually having a shrine, in a sense, is a ritual. So the fact that we've got a shrine, we've got candles lit, and that we face the shrine, it's interesting how we instinctively face the shrine when we come into this room. In a sense, that's a ritual. Leaving our shoes off is another kind of ritual. So what we're doing with ritual is that it's like we're saying to ourselves, actually, I'm leaving behind for a moment this world of this everyday world that I live in, of getting things done and so on, and entering a world that's more the world of imagination, the world of beauty and imagination, and at least just for a time, I'm going to give that validity, as well as the world of going to work, getting our washing done, all these things that we do. In one way you could say that we're doing that in order that all those activities, of those everyday activities, start to be within the world of beauty and the imagination rather than the other way around. Because usually it's the other way around, isn't it? We've got our looking after our children if we've got them, going to work, as I say, doing the ironing if we do it, and we might fit in a little corner for imagination and beauty. But one way of looking at Buddhist ritual is we're trying to do that the other way around, saying the world of imagination and beauty is actually the more important, even the more real world, and all the other activities can take part in that. Anyway, that was a bit of a poetic way to answer the question. So we teach ritual, we do conduct ritual, we introduce ritual in Buddhism, and we encourage you to take part if you want to. It's and see what one makes of it oneself. Yeah, but we do chanting and devotional practices. But I would say, even walking into this room and looking at a shrine is, in a sense, is a ritual. Leaving our shoes at the door is a ritual. Yeah. Don't know if that goes anyway. Not sure. Did you have a more specific question, or?
No, I thought your first answer was great.
Okay, good. Good. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
What sort of things do you do in retreats?
On retreats, what we do is basically the three things I've talked about. So we meditate quite a bit. We also, if you're new, we teach meditation. And we have talks like this, so we have talks and the chance to ask questions. We often have smaller groups. Obviously, this is a very big group, but we usually every day we'd have a group where you were with like 6 or 7 or 8 people to talk, ask questions and talk about your experience. We try and create this ethical environment that I was talking about, where you're with other people who are also meditating. We try and create this environment of community, of skillful speech, of skillful action, like for example we eat vegetarian food and so on. So you're trying to create an environment where it's easier to practice meditation, where it's easier to practice Sila or ethics, because everything's supporting it, and it's easier to discover this other dimension of mind that I've been trying to hint of, that's more than the everyday mind. So we run retreats for weekends and also longer. But it's amazing, even on a weekend retreat, which goes from Friday night, we go off in a minibus, come back on Sunday afternoon. It seems quite short, but actually when you're there, it seems like time does a funny thing, which seems to stretch, but in a positive way, where you look back and you think, gosh, that was just a normal weekend, but how come so much sort of happened? And the happening is an inner happening. Externally, you're just like going for breakfast, meditating, going for lunch, doing some more meditation. Not much happens externally, but internally, like loads can happen actually.
You have specific places you go to?
Yes, we do. We've just rebuilt our own retreat centre in the Suffolk countryside. I really, really recommend it. I've just been there myself. It's about 2 hours outside London in Suffolk. It's absolutely beautiful. It's got an amazing shrine room that actually almost meditates for you, because it's so... you just feel like being quiet. Even if you've never meditated before, you feel like when you walk in, your mind quietens down, and that's because it's very, very aesthetically pleasing and beautiful. The countryside is lovely. It's got very, very nice sitting room. It's nice at this time of the year because we've got like a fire in the sitting room and everything, and people just can sit around chatting or reading or in silence. And in the summer it's beautiful as well. So that's the main place we go to. That's where we go to for all our weekend retreats. And it's great because, it's within distance of London. And as I say, we go in a minibus. So we run an introductory retreat every single month there. We've got one on just now, actually. So if you've at all found anything interesting here today, or anything that's kind of made you think I want to learn a bit more about this, you couldn't go wrong with a retreat, really. And as I say, even if it's your very first time here, you can go on retreat. We'll teach you to meditate once you're there and so on. So, yeah. Yes.
So I can't help saying there's a lot of other places.
Yes, I know, but I'm just sticking on one just now, Alison, but there are other places as well. Yeah.
No, I know.
Yeah, there's other. So that's just one single. So that's just one single retreat centre. It's not the only one. There's actually those, but it's just so as not to keep it simple. I'm just saying there's one. But again, you can, if you want to know, you can talk to Alison or you can talk to me about other retreat centres round about. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Just wondering, Buddhists tend to be vegetarians. Does that extend to veganism?
Okay. Yeah. So yes, vegetarianism and veganism. So the principle of why Buddhists are Buddhists in this community tend to be vegetarian or working towards vegetarianism is because of the principle of non-harm, which is at the heart of Buddhism. So most people that come into this centre, or certainly people who are committed to coming to this centre, will be practising vegetarianism. Now, at the same time, it's an individual choice. So what we do is we teach the principle and we teach meditation, for example, where we're explicitly reflecting on this fact that we and other beings, including animals, are non-separate. So we practice that. Many people find that by practicing that in a meditative way, that the vegetarianism becomes a natural choice. So it's not a rule. What I'm wanting to emphasise is it's not a rule. And veganism would be an extension of that. So recently at the centre here, we've made a decision to have the whole centre vegan. And not have dairy products or dairy milk and so on. At the same time, it's not a rule, and it's not a rule for anyone coming to the centre, because that's one of the principles of Buddhist ethics. That they're training principles that oneself undertakes, because you see that they're the deepening of human values to oneself, and they're connecting with other beings, including animals as well. So veganism would be a natural extension of that. Yeah. Yes.
I wonder so you mentioned, Buddha himself, for example, I understand he was a prince, he gave that up and led a holy man's life, and lots of members of the order, I understand, may have had, say, high-flying careers, and they sort of decide to then not follow a materialistic world and live in a Buddhist community and teach and so on. Is there then a conflict with someone who, say, does have a high-flying career and yet still wants to follow principles and teachings?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I think again, so let me think of how best to answer this. So in terms of career, so there's a principle of try not to cause harm. So the principle of non-harm extends to all aspects of one's life, including work. So sometimes people who... Like, I've known some people who did have a high-flying career, that's quite a broad term, isn't it, who've come and realised that they practice in meditation, think, actually, I'm working all the hours that God sends, I was going to say. That is actually, they go on retreat and they think, God, why am I doing this? So there might be a natural choice not to do that. Somebody may discover that in a low-flying career, whatever that is. What am I trying to say? There's nothing that says you can't, for example, earn loads of money and be a Buddhist. But what you would be looking at is am I causing harm to other beings or myself? Now, in saying that, you're always going to be causing. There's always going to be harm, isn't there? I mean, the world we live in is so complex. So you're looking at minimising harm, If you sort of wrenched yourself away from a career or a vocation that was giving you great joy because you think this is what a good Buddhist would do, that would be causing harm. Do you see what I mean? Because it wouldn't be fulfilling. So these are choices that are often not simple, and often it's quite interesting that it's although one isn't, when you're meditating, so much thinking about these things, often as a result of meditation and coming more deeply into what one's values are, what is the right choice for an individual might emerge. So just to reiterate, it's not that earning lots of money, if that goes with a high-flying career, and being a Buddhist are necessarily incompatible. But thinking that money is going to protect one in an existential way, I'm sure, nobody consciously thinks that with any sort of, even a little bit of intelligence, but sometimes we can be more deeply attached to these things than we realise, because, we can be attached to anything, you can be attached to someone who's given up their career and da-da-da. So you're always going to have to look at that in quite a subtle way. But it's not saying anything quite so simplistic. Yeah. How are we doing? Oh yes, we're going to have to wind up. It's 5:02, so let's wind up so there's time for a little 5-minute break in case any of you want to come to the next talk, which is Singaman is talking about what enlightenment is, which will follow on from this talk, which I only very, very briefly touched on enlightenment. So I'd really recommend coming to that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you.